Now, there's calls for urgent action at EU level to try and end sky-high fees for families seating, trying to sit together on board a plane heading on their summer holidays. Irish MEP for Fine Gael, Regina Doherty, is with me on the line today. Regina, what do you want to see happen?
Hi, Andrea. So, first of all, what we're doing at the moment is we're reviewing a passenger rights piece of legislation that was drafted in 2005. So every now and again, legislation gets reviewed. And there's a practice in the world, probably, where passengers are charged extra money for putting their children sitting beside them when they go on a plane on holidays. Now, I do have to say at the outset, our own Ryanair at home is really, really good for not doing that. They do it voluntarily, but there's no rules across the EU governing all of our airlines. And lots of them do charge, and lots of them, make you charge 12 quid to put your Johnny or your Mary sitting beside you each. And first of all, you shouldn't ever be charging people to put their children with their adults together. It's not up to airlines to look after somebody else's children because you put them down the back. Families should be allowed to sit together, and it should be included in the cost of the price. It shouldn't be an add-on. But also, we should be safeguarding children and supporting families through their travels. I mean, airlines are going through a surge, obviously, of businesses at the moment. They shouldn't be allowed to take advantage of the fact that they can charge people for this, that and the other. I'm charging to put children together with their parents, I just think is apparent. And so I'm looking for an amendment to this particular piece of legislation under passenger rights to say that you won't be allowed to charge extra to put your children beside you on an airplane, regardless of the airline, as long as you're travelling across the European Union.
Now, I've been looking, Regina, at some of the policies about this today, and I know our listeners will be better equipped to tell me how much it's costing them to take their children with them on the summer holiday this year.
Yeah.
But to the best of my knowledge, if you have a kid under the age of 12 years of age, and I think this seems to apply for both Aer Lingus and for Ryanair, so you will pay to put their bum on a seat, right, when they're over, I think it's 2 years of age. And some of the airlines up to certain age specifications seem to just charge about €25 for the child. But a parent is allowed with a child under a certain age to have them sit beside them. It's only when they get older that if they want to pick a seat for them, we'll say seat A and B, they have to pay for that.
Now, as I said to you, I think we're lucky in Ireland because of Ryanair and Aer Lingus, but that's not the reality across the European Union. So Ryanair has a voluntary policy where your child under 12 is allowed to sit beside the parents, for free. And I think that's very commendable. But voluntary policies, I don't think are enough. We need clear binding legislation so the parents aren't forced, regardless of the airline. And I could rhyme off 10 that do charge you and that do take advantage of it. And in a cost of living crisis that most Europeans are feeling for the last number of years, but also safeguarding our children and supporting families, I don't think it's tenable for airlines to be able to make money off the back of charging parents to have their children sitting beside them. So I'm pushing for an amendment to this particular piece of legislation, which is our passenger rights multimodal transport legislation that we're currently reviewing in our Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee at the moment.
So listeners will still have to pay to bring their child with them, but you're just hoping that they won't have to pay to then sit beside them on that flight.
So obviously, whatever price the flight is for the adult and for the child, I'm saying that should be enough. And when I go and pick my seats, to put Mary and Johnny sitting beside Mammy and Daddy, I shouldn't be charged an extra $12.50 per child or $25 as you have suggested. It should be included in the ticket. It shouldn't be anybody else's responsibility on an airline to look after children, whether they're under 12 or 13 or 14. Families should be allowed to sit together. We should be safeguarding children, and no airline should be allowed to make money off the back of what this is called as an additional extra. Putting families together, particularly young children, is not an additional extra for airlines to make money off, and I'd like to see the law changed.
Yeah, so in this case, our own seem to be doing it, voluntarily anyway. Yeah. So it's other European airlines really, Regina, is it?
It's a lot of European airlines do it. It's a lot of the low-cost airlines do it with a view to trying to make an extra few bob. They're trying to attract you with the $29.99 flight, but then by the time you add your bag, you add your seat, all of those things add up, and that's how they're making their money. I think it'd be more fair for adults and less stressful, for families, and it would be far more transparent if we just decided that the price was X and that included families being able to sit together. And that's what I'm going to push for, is to try and defend this consumer right across the EU so that families can sit together when they're travelling on their holidays.
Regina Doherty, Fine Gael MEP, thanks for joining us here on Lunchtime Live. Owen Corrie's the editor of Travel Extra. Owen, I'm looking at Ryanair's policy at the minute here. They allow families book for children aged between 2 to 11. They get free reserved seating so that they can sit beside a parent.
Yeah, if you're booking on Ryanair, they ask you for the date of birth of the passenger, and a whole set of questions kick in if the date of birth is for a young person. But they're pretty. They're the ones that probably introduced the whole notion of paying for a reserved seat. Listeners will remember Ryanair didn't have reserved seating. We had Stampede boarding until about 10 years ago. They do charge for the reserved seat. That has become pretty much the normal across Europe. It's not a lot extra. What Regina is presenting as a pro-consumer move could actually turn out to be an anti-consumer move, because I can assure you, if legislation comes in, they will just throw the extra charge onto every ticket. So the people who benefit from, playing the system, not bringing a big bag on board and taking an unallocated seat, the average Ryanair fare is €45. They're the ones who will lose out of this.
So the people who book the flight and don't pick a seat and wait until they're checking in usually end up with the middle seat on.
No, the point I'm making is that you don't pay for an allocated seat. You get a slightly cheaper fare.
Yeah.
If the legislation comes in, everybody will have to pay the extra.
But in this instance, our own airlines, as Regina mentioned, the likes of Aer Lingus and Ryanair, they already seem to have voluntary policies for families travelling together.
Do you have to pay for a reserved seat for the adult, and then the children don't get charged the extra? I'm also fascinated by the fact that safeguarding is seen as an issue for the airline. It should really be an issue for the parent, Andrea. No parent should be thinking of going on holidays without paying for their allocated seat so that the children can sit beside them. And if they're travelling on one of the other airlines, paying the allocated seats for the other children. It's what happens when you have children. It gets more expensive travelling. That lovable, wonderful joy they bring in your life also brings a fair amount of extra expense. I've good personal experience of this.
Yeah, so it's up to the parents, or really then own, is it? It's up to families.
Absolutely.
You want to sit together,
the
pay for it.
Blaming the airlines and telling the airlines they're trying to shake down parents for a few bob. Airlines are under pressure. They lost billions. I mean, Ryanair lost over €1.5 billion during the pandemic. It's going to take many years to get all of that back. Some of the other major airlines, the Lufthansa Group, Air France Group, IAG, are only getting back into profit. So to say they're shaking down, their pricing model of airlines is completely changed by low cost, dynamic pricing. When you book depends on the price. Whether you pay for bags depends. That can affect the price, and allocated seating can affect the price. Like it or not, it's how aviation is pricing itself, because that's what the consumer responded to. It also means that what used to cost £240 Irish return for a flight to London, set in stone, no competition between Aer Lingus and British Airways, who were the two operators on the route, has now turned into something that you can get an average fare of €45 on Ryanair. And if you play the system, you get that fare. If you need to pay for allocated seating, or if you want to pay for allocated seating, you can pay for that. When it comes to a parent, and there are safeguarding issues, and nobody's arguing with that, but you're in that game where you do pay for the allocated seating if you become a parent.
Yeah, stay with us, Owen, if you don't mind. A lot of people getting in touch about this. 087 1400 106 is the WhatsApp number. This texter says, what a load of total nonsense. Just pay for your seat like everybody else. Colin Cleric tells me that in Italy it was cheaper to travel by train with our children than on our own. Naples and Rome, for instance, €100 for my wife and I. It was €72 for the four of us, as two adults and two children. Lisa O'Sullivan Shaw is with me on the line. Lisa, you are a mum of four. What's your experience about booking flights?
Hi, Andrea. So I'm not sure really. I'm open to correction here on this, but from my experience of bringing our four boys with us, we've paid for their seats, which we have no issue with. We've paid for our fare, but we've always had to pay to sit together, as in allocated reserved seats. And that includes Ryanair, and that includes Aer Lingus, because that's exclusively who we've flown with, because there's always the threat of, you'll get the message saying, if you don't reserve seating, you may be separated from your party. And that is with two adults and four children between the ages of 9 and 12. So I've always had to pay extra for them, and that's Ryanair and that's Aer Lingus. or else run the risk of arriving to the airport and we're all sitting all over the place and then there's mayhem in the plane, and that's no fun for anybody. And I was never, and you know, I have no problem paying for our fares. We don't get any discount like child fares. I don't know, are they extinct? Are they
there
gone?
Is Family
Whatever.
Plus. I was looking at the website. Owen might maybe know a bit more about that, but some of the airlines offer these Family Plus packages, Owen, don't they?
Absolutely. I mean, there is incentives. The airlines aren't in the business of breaking up families. They're in the business of charging for allocated seating. It makes the running of the aircraft more efficient. It also means that, you know, they can get incentivize passengers. If you want to allocate your seat way in advance, you have to pay a little bit extra. That goes with all the airlines. But they're not in the business of breaking up families. There's a whole set of privileges and extra, you know, ways of working around the rule come in when it comes to families. You've itemised the Ryanair one, the boarding children in advance. If there's an issue with, which I've been on flights where has been an issue with family, airline staff will immediately move to try and put matters to right before the aircraft begins to fly. What I do see, though, occasionally is parents not paying for the allocated seat and then trying to tell people they have to move because they need to sit with their children. I mean, you had that awful incident with Vogue Williams heaping vitriol on somebody because they wouldn't move from the seat.
That's right. Yeah, I presume
which they'd paid for, and you know, he said politely declined. And the next thing, Vogue is using her social media to try and humiliate the guy internationally, publicly. There is an issue here. Parents know what they have to do. They know what the responsibilities are. And you can't transfer that onto the airline.
Lisa, you're effectively 2 rows in a plane.
Yeah, 2 rows.
Yeah. So you book the seats. You wouldn't just get on and ask somebody then, do you mind, Owen, maybe moving to... No.
Not at all.
No, Lisa, I would never ever expect...
Go on ahead.
This is exactly what we're talking about, and a responsible parent knows exactly what she's doing. And the other thing about the international travel industry, not so much the aviation, but on the hotel side, if you have 4 children, you're down there with drug dealers and terrorists. You know, anyone who has more than 2 children has to go. The whole holiday package world is built for a 2x2. And my sympathies with Lisa, because it's very hard to navigate that, and her heroic efforts to get the holiday industry. It's something I feel very strongly about. We need to deal with people who 4 children, 5 children, or in both my parents' cases, 7 children.
Okay.
The large family has to be accommodated.
It is, Elisa, you have to book well in advance to get the seats you want.
Yeah, and you know, it's not an issue of like, you know, I want these allocated seats. I'll sit on the plane of the wing. It doesn't the wing of the plane, sorry. I would sit anywhere. It doesn't bother us where we're sitting. I don't need to be at the front, the back, whatever. We just want to be together. It's like that. I would never expect anyone. Number one, I would never want my kids sitting like away from us. You know, they're still young. They need us. I would never expect anybody to be inflict children on somebody else's you know, flight. Like, that's their holiday and people have paid for their seats. So I have to go, and I have to pay the extra. What I would love is, because you're bringing kids and I'm paying basically 6 adult tickets. I would like it to be. I would like it to be some way that whatever I pay is whatever I pay, and you will be, you know, like in inverted commas, guaranteed to sit together somewhere, anywhere, without having to pay for reserve seating to pick this seat and that seat, you know. But it's always that kind of threat with having bringing kids, and I do disagree with the fact that, you know, Ryanair, you know, board kids first. They don't. They board kids with if you have a buggy and you have a small child.
Certain young children, I suppose, are the young age. Yeah. I want to bring Tracy's with us too on the line. Tracy, who do you think's responsible, the family or the airline, if you want to all sit together?
Oh, well, as a parent, I would book the seat for my child. I wouldn't expect the airline just to allocate me together just because I have a child.
So you'd pay for the reserve seating if you had to, Tracy? You would, yeah.
Like, if I travel anywhere on a train, or like, you can book your seats on the train. I always do, to make sure we're together. Like, my daughter's 10. I wouldn't imagine her sitting beside a complete stranger and I up the other end of the plane. Couldn't do that. And she wouldn't allow it either. She'd probably kick off.
She'd want to sit beside you. So when you're booking, or if you're ever looking at any sort of flights or seating arrangements, in your experience of this, you've always had her sit beside you?
Always.
Yeah.
I would never ever sit with anyone else. I don't understand people that think, oh, should they be grand? No, not a hope.
So you agree with this proposed call for a change to the legislation around this?
There should be some form of change. Like, I understand, like, airlines have to make money, but I'd still pay the extra now if I was travelling, just to be sure she was sitting beside me.
Rory from
I see it as my responsibility.
Yeah, your responsibility. Okay. Rory from Rory's Travel Club is with us on the line. Is there a concern that, if this new rule comes into force, Rory, that it will actually just push up the base price of flights?
Yeah, well, just listening, it is a very, very interesting topic. But one thing I want to just point across is legally most airlines require children under 12 to be sat beside an adult, an accompanying adult at no extra cost. What that means is basically if you don't pay for your seats by law, if you've one child and the child's under 12, it's up to them to put the adult beside the child for free. That being said, if it's 2 adults, 2 children, they may well not be able to put all 4 of you together or even in the rows behind each other. But legally, there should be 1 adult, 1 child on any flight. Some airlines actually allow pre-allocated seats for families when booked through travel agents. I know the likes of you're heading to the US, depending on what fares they have, the likes of Aer United Airways and stuff will be able to allocate the seats when you book, meaning that they will be able to obviously give you the seat at no extra cost, which is great. But where I see, and just from listening to this conversation, where I see families running into bother is if they're 2, 3, 4, even 4 children between the ages of 12 and 18. Obviously, in Europe, maybe not so much because the cost per seat isn't typically that expensive. It might only be 10, 15, 20 euro with the likes of Ryanair. But as you head into the States, it can be considerably, States and even further beyond, it can be 50, 60, 70 and even more in some circumstances per seat, which can be extremely expensive. And in that situation, I would be just double checking with if it is the travel agent you're booking with to make sure that you're booking with the best airline for your family that's inevitably hopefully going to save you money.
Yeah. Texter here asking, what if your child lands in a seat next to somebody that they mightn't feel comfortable sitting beside? No child should be made fly no child should be allowed to fly and sit next to anybody other than their parent. John in Limerick says, we were on a flight last year and a lady with 4 kids caused total chaos, insisting that we move to accommodate her children. She got short shrift from everybody. As one guy said, if you want to sit together, pay for the seat, like the rest of us. This texter says, I would actually offer to sit on the wing of a plane if I was faced with the prospect of sitting next to any child on a flight that wasn't my own. I'd have zero issue in swapping.